All right, let's solve the design Twitter problem on LeetCode. I'm not going to go through the description, but basically the gist of it is we need to fill in these four methods which have been given to us by LeetCode. What the method post tweet does is quite literally based on it takes the user who wants to post a tweet and posts that tweet. We have a get news feed which returns the feed or the rest of the tweets from other users that a user follows. And then we have the follow and unfollow methods, which do as they say. They allow users to follow other users and unfollow other users. And just to make sure it's established, the get news feed returns the feed of the users that a user follows. All right, so the way we're going to do this is first we're going to create two maps. Map integer to list, and the object inside is going to be tweet, and I'll explain this in just a second, and let's call it user tweets. We're going to create another map which takes integer and a set of integers, which also I'll explain in just a second. Let's call this follows. And then we need an int timestamp. Okay, why do we need a timestamp? It's because in the description, they ask us to order the tweets from most recent to least recent. So we need to be able to track which tweet is the most recent, and we do so by creating an integer timestamp, which we will use later in just a second. So let's begin with map follows. What this map does is it takes an integer, which is going to be the user ID, and for each user ID, it stores a set of integers, which are the user IDs of the people that this user ID follows. And then for user tweets, what the map carries is the integer of the user ID and the list of his or her tweets, right? And why are we using a object tweet, which obviously doesn't exist in Java? It's because we want our tweet to store two pieces of information, basically. What we needed to carry is first its tweet ID, because each tweet is unique, right? Similar to the user, each user has a unique ID. Each tweet has a unique ID. And the second thing we wanted to store is the time in which it was posted. So that's why we use the tweet object, which we're going to create in just a second. So right here in public Twitter, we're actually gonna declare these variables. So user tweets is equal to new hash map, because obviously it's a map. And then follows equals new hash map as well. And then we're gonna say timestamp is equal to 0. Okay, so now let's actually create our class tweet. So class tweet, and then in class tweet, like we said, we needed to store two things, which is the ID of the tweet itself and the timestamp. So in time, and then here we're gonna put public class or public tweet, which takes, this is the constructor of the tweet class. Every time for example, we do tweet x equals new tweet, we're gonna input the ID and the timestamp or the time. So this takes int ID and int time. And then we're gonna say this dot ID is equal to ID, and this dot time equals to time. Okay, perfect. So now we can actually begin with the functions themselves. So if we go down to post tweet, the first thing we're gonna do is we have this map user tweets, and the function is to post tweet. So the first thing we need to consider is, what if the user just created his account? He's not going to have a map, or he's not gonna have a new list. All right, so the first thing we need to consider is if the user has just created a new account, then his user ID isn't going to be in the map. So that's why we have to do first and foremost user tweets dot put if absent in case the user ID doesn't exist, user ID, and a new array list since we're storing the tweets in a list. Okay. And then what we want to do after that is we're gonna get his ID, user.get user ID from the map. And then what we're gonna do is we're going to add a new tweet that takes tweet ID and timestamp. And then we're gonna increment the timestamp. And now this tweet has been documented for, and its upload date, if you'd like to call it that, has been documented. And we created a tweet with, as I said, the tweet object is supposed to store a tweet ID and a time. So our timestamp is right there. It started at 0. Once this is posted, the timestamp is going to increase to 1. And the timestamp is independent for every user. So just because this user, for example, posted a new tweet, another user's timestamp is still going to be 0 if they didn't post anything. Okay, so what we did here is we checked if the user exists in the map, and if he doesn't, add him to the map with a new array list to store his tweets. And then if he doesn't exist, or if it does exist, we go to this step where we get the user ID and we add the new tweet which he just created, which is the input to this method. It's the what's it called? The signature of this method. Okay, so what's the next step? So now what we have to do is we need to have a sort of safety check, because if the user doesn't follow anyone, then he needs to be at least able to see his own tweets. So this is what we're going to do. This is going to help us for the next step. So we have the map called follows, which stores the user ID and the set of users that he follows. So we're gonna put if absent, once again, if this map is absent, the user ID, and give him a new, or her, a new, give them a new hash set. Why do we want to use a hash set? It's because hash sets don't store duplicates. Therefore, if a user follows someone, and he follows that same person again, it's not going to show up twice in the set. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say follows dot get this user ID, and we're going to dot add user ID. So this way the user follows themselves and they can see their own tweets essentially. Now for that, and that pretty much wraps up the post tweet function. Now for get newsfeed, this one's a bit tricky, but what we have to do here is we have to return a list of integers, and this integer is the tweet ID. So what it asks us to do is return actually the tweet ID of all the most recent tweets, of the users that the user follows. I believe, we need to retrieve the 10 most recent tweets from the user's newsfeed, where the newsfeed is the tweets of other users that they follow. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to create a list of tweet, the object that we created earlier, list tweet, and we're going to call it all tweets. Okay, and this is going to be a new array list. It's going to be empty in the beginning. We're going to manually fill it up in just a second, and we're going to create a set integer followed, which is equal to follows.get or default, and I'll explain this in just a sec. User ID new hash set. Okay, so what I'm planning to do is we're going to collect all the tweets, not just the most recent ones, not just 10. We're going to collect all the tweets of the users that the user follows, and then we're going to later sort them out to only return the 10 most recent ones. Now for this line of code, set integer followed, what we're doing is we're creating a set that stores integers followed. So what I'm saying basically is I'm retrieving all the user IDs of the users that user ID follow. It's a bit of a mouthful, but basically I'm getting the followers of user ID and I'm storing them in a set. Why am I doing get or default? That's just because when I want to begin working with it, in case this user doesn't exist in the map, we don't want it to error. So instead we're going to default it to return a new hash set. This hash set isn't actually created, it's just temporary, just so that it doesn't crash when if the user doesn't exist and we're working with this code in the next following lines. All right, so what's next is we have to create another safety check because maybe the user doesn't post a tweet before he gets his feed. So what we're gonna do is very similar. So if followed this time does not contain, so if followed does not contain user ID, then what's gonna happen? We're going to just add it. Basically, we're gonna add his user. So what I'm saying is, if the user doesn't follow himself, if in this set the user ID isn't found, then we're just going to add it to the set, and this way the user now follows themselves, basically. And let's add a semicolon, and then that's closed. Okay. So the next step now is we're going to create a for loop of int followee ID. One second. Okay. So here, this is the same as the typical for loop that we're used to seeing. It's the same. It works the same. It's just a bit of a different syntax. What we're saying here is for every followee ID in followed, and then we're going to begin coding. Instead of creating a variable I equals 0 and incrementing through each value I, we're just instantly checking for every int followee ID in followed. So for every integer in the set followed which we created, what do we want to do? We want to create a list tweet, this object tweet let's call it tweet, which is equal to user tweets dot get or default followee ID new array list. Okay, and then what we're gonna do is all tweets dot add all, and then tweet. Okay, so what's going on here? We're creating a list of object tweets. So we're creating a list of tweets. We called it tweet. What's this list equal to? We go to our user tweets map and we get the list of tweets, this one, from our integer user ID or followee ID. So if we go back to our map, we have followee ID, and this followee ID or this user ID, we have a user ID which looks at or links to the list of tweets of that user, correct? So now we're saying for every followee ID in followed, we have that integer user in our map. So followee ID, we're going to the followee ID in the map, and we're retrieving his list or their list of tweets. And similarly, in case this followee ID doesn't exist in the map, we're going to give them a new array list just so that it doesn't crash, which is going to be empty. And then add all tweets, which is the list we just created here. We're adding all of their tweets. And yeah, that's basically what's going on. So now that we have a full list of tweets called all tweets, remember we need to sort them and by most recent to least recent and retrieve the 10 most recent ones. So now we actually need to begin sorting. And the way we're going to do that is first we're going to do collections dot sort what are we sorting? We're sorting all tweets. And this is a bit complicated, but what we're doing here is we're creating a lambda function in order to sort them the way we want. And then we're doing, let's create a list of integer called res for result equals new array list. Alright. So what I'm saying here, there's a function in Java. You have to import collections for it. It sorts our whatever we want to sort. For example, here we want to sort our all tweets list. By default, it sorts them either by alphabetical order from A to Z or in an increasing way from 0 upwards. But if we wanted to do a custom comparison or a custom sort, we're going to introduce a lambda function. And what this basically says is we have A comma B. Java automatically infers that the data types of these are of whatever the all tweets is, which is a list of tweets. So what are we comparing when we do b.time minus a.time? Remember when we created the tweet object, we gave it an ID and a time. Since we want to sort it by the most recent, we're going to do b.time minus a.time. This way we get the most recent tweets before the old tweets. Okay. This is a long way of using the comparator method in Java. This is the I think I said this is the shorter way of using the comparator method. It's not that complicated, and it makes our work much simpler. So just to summarize, what we're doing is we're sorting all tweets. Java automatically infers that we're sorting of object tweet, not integer, not string, because it looked at all tweets and it saw it stored the tweets, right? And then what we're doing is we're sorting b.time minus a.time, which means the most recent before the oldest. If it was a.time minus b.time, then we would reverse it and we'd be sorting by the oldest first and then the most recent. And then we're creating a new list of integer results because remember we need to return a list, right here, list of integer. And so now we actually need to now that we have everything sorted the way we want, we just need to retrieve the 10 first tweets, right? Because they want 10. So the way we're going to do that is for int I equal to 0, I less than math dot min between 10 and all tweets dot size, and I'll explain that in just a second. Very simple though. I plus plus. So what I'm saying here is maybe our all tweets list doesn't even have 10 tweets. Maybe it just has 6 tweets. Would we return 10 or would we return 6? We can't return 10 because there's obviously 4 non-existing tweets. So we're going to return the minimum between 10 and all tweets.size. If all tweets, for example, had 12 tweets, we're just going to be retrieving the first 10. All right, so, and then here we're going to just res, which is the list we just created earlier, and add all tweets dot get I, which is, so we have the list all tweets, right? Each value has an index. We're getting the value at index I, which starts at 0, which is the most recent. But the thing is, all tweets, if you remember, is storing tweets, but we just want to return the integer of, we want to return the unique ID of the tweet itself. So we're just going to add .id, which we created earlier in the toTweet class right here. And where are we? Semicolon. And then finally, after the for loop, we just want to return res, or the result. And that's get newsfeed. Now follow and unfollow are pretty straightforward. So what are we doing? follows, which is the map we created earlier, dot put if absent in case the follower ID doesn't already exist in the map. If he doesn't exist, what do we want to do? We want to give him a new hash set, right? A new empty hash set. And then follows dot get follower ID. Make sure you look at the signature of each method to see what we're supposed to return. Follower ID, and then what do we want to add? We want to add the followee ID, who they would like to follow. Okay, and then for the unfollow, it's also pretty straightforward, but there's just one case we need to consider. If, for example, the follower ID is equal to the followee ID, what does that mean? It means if the user wants to unfollow themselves, we don't want that to happen. So we're just going to return empty, return nothing. And this works. Usually if you have a void, you can't use return. But because we return nothing, it's not going to crash. It'll work perfectly. And we're essentially stopping the function. Just stop right there. If they try to unfollow themselves, exit the method, basically. If they follow themselves, don't do anything. Otherwise, create a set integer, let's just call it set, which is equal to follows dot get follower ID. So from the follows map, which we created in the beginning, we're retrieving the set of followers that follower ID follows. If this set is not equal to null, if it's not empty, set dot remove followee ID. Now, when we do this, it's even if the followee ID isn't contained in the set of users that follower ID follows, it won't crash. And that's it. That's the design Twitter problem. Let's submit. I'm sure there's probably syntax errors somewhere that I didn't notice. Oh, yep. Oh, okay. This is Boolean, so it has to be 2 equals. Let's try now. Hopefully that worked. Hey, okay. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful.